This is one of the great forgotten spectacles of early 19th century London, the departure of the Royal Mail coaches from the General Post Office in St. Martin's-le-Grand, just north of St. Paul's Cathedral. The painting of which this is a print was created by James Pollard, an artist and engraver who specialized in coaching and sporting scenes, and this hand-coloured aquatint of his work was engraved in 1830 by Richard Gilson Reeve. It is one of a series of prints by Reeve of Pollard's pictures depicting mail coaches at the General Post Office. This one is particularly dramatic, and indeed romantic, because of its nocturnal setting, with the serene dome of St. Paul's, illuminated by soft silver moonlight, rising above the bustling street, lit by the golden glow of gaslight. Coaching prints were always very popular, both during the heyday of the coaches and afterwards, when the railways had taken their traffic, and coaching had acquired the glow of nostalgia. When it appeared, this print celebrated progress and modernity, but within a few years it, and countless images like it, had become visual elegies to a lost way of life. The large building that dominates the scene is the General Post Office. This was a very new building at the time this print was made. It had been finished just the year before, in 1829. We are looking towards the south, into the centre of the City of London. The large classical post office building, with its long ranges of windows and its porticos, is on the east side of St. Martin's-le-Grand, and at the end of the street is St. Paul's Cathedral, with its dome rising into the night sky. The top of the choir, the easternmost part of the building, can be seen rising above the houses and shops in Newgate Street and Cheapside. On the right, western side of the street, are shops, all lit, as is the street itself, by the glow of gaslight. In the bottom right corner of the print is the frontage of the Bull and Mouth Inn, a famous coaching establishment. In the foreground on the left is the courtyard of the post office, where mail coaches and carts are being loaded with the mail and prepared for departure. The carts are used to carry mails locally in London and to nearby towns and villages. In some cases the mails are transferred at particular inns to mail coaches, which carry them onwards to their final destinations. The mail coaches shown in the picture are those which begin their journey here, at St. Martin's-le-Grand. The General Post Office building, as I have said, was a new one, having opened in September 1829. Before this, London's main post office and the central hub of the mail coach service was on Lombard Street, near the Mansion House. This had been adapted over the years from a number of already existing buildings, and became increasingly congested and awkward as postal business grew. The House of Commons heard in May 1815 that there were numerous and great inconveniences attendant on the old post office, with employees shut up in close rooms, dirty and covered with smoke. Mail coaches had to queue down the street, which caused traffic problems. The post office argued that a new General Post Office building was required. The government agreed, and an Act of Parliament authorising the scheme, the City of London and Westminster Streets and Post Office Act, was passed in 1815. The site in St. Martin's-le-Grand was chosen. This map from 1830 shows the location, just north of St. Paul's. Newspapers reported that 131 houses were purchased and pulled down, and over 1,000 residents were removed to clear the site. Clearance and then construction were hugely messy and disruptive processes, and the whole thing took more than 10 years. The scheme also involved the widening and improving of the street, with elegant new pavements, railings, and street lamps. Some of the buildings facing onto St. Martin's-le-Grand were also rebuilt with new facades, notably the Bull and Mouth Inn. This print from 1819 shows the congestion and clutter of the street before the clearance and the erection of the new post office, while this print from 1834 shows the contrasting view after the transformation was complete, celebrating the opening up and improvement of the urban fabric. The commissioners appointed under the 1815 Act put the design for the new building out to an architectural competition. After 100 designs had been submitted, the commissioners decided that they did not want to be bothered with a competition after all, sent the entries back, and gave the job to Robert Smirke, who had not entered a competition, and indeed never entered architectural competitions. Smirke was a very successful architect, the designer of many public buildings in the first half of the 19th century, whose best-known work is the British Museum. He was a Greek Revival classicist who favoured simplicity of form, restrained ornament, and an overall impression of dignified austerity. The main richness of the design was provided by the great Ionic order based on the Temple of Athena at Priene, which also inspired the columns of the British Museum. The result was widely admired. This print by James Pollard from his own painting shows the elegant proportions of the wide facade. The Illustrated London News described it in 1843 as a magnificent building. It is one of the largest public edifices now existing in the City of London. In its construction, the order of the Grecian Ionic is followed. The principal front is 400 feet in length, and has an imposing effect, arising from the continuity and simplicity of its elevation and the solidity and magnificence of its proportions. In the interior was a large public vestibule, rooms for domestic and foreign mail and for newspapers, letter sorting rooms, facilities for receiving and dispatching mail, and all the other offices required in the main post office of the kingdom, all lit by over 700 gas lamps. But the 19th century British post office was an enormous institution, carrying a huge volume of traffic which was constantly expanding, and this seemingly commodious new building proved too small almost as soon as it was opened. Many extensions had to be added over subsequent decades, above, beneath, and around it. This photograph, from the end of the 19th century, shows the extra stories built onto the top, and the roofs of the basement structures that had grown out from under the building and extended into what had been the surrounding courtyard. The original simple elegance and integrity of Smirke's great building was soon lost amid a tangle of later alterations and extensions. Reeves and Pollard's print of 1830, then, preserves a brief and transient moment in history, showing the new post office building, symbol of one of the great public institutions of the land, in pristine and unaltered splendour. It also shows it presiding over another celebrated symbol of the postal service, the Royal Mail coach system, then at its zenith. Mail coaches had begun to run as part of the Royal Mail postal system in the 1780s. They were the invention of a private individual, John Palmer of Bath, who proposed to the post office that a regular system of coaches running to a timetable over newly improved trunk roads would enhance the postal system, making it quicker and more reliable and safer from robbery than the network of mounted carriers who had conveyed the mail since the mid-17th century. The initial and inevitable resistance of the post office bureaucracy to new ideas was overcome by Mr. Palmer's demonstration of the clear advantages of his scheme, and by the mid-1780s a national network of mail coaches had been established, and was constantly being expanded. The mail coach system impressed people and inspired them to admiration. But by the time it reached its greatest extent and sophistication in the 1830s, the writing was already on the wall for it in the form of the new railways. Mail trains were faster, safer, could carry more traffic, and enabled sorting to be carried out during the journey. By the end of the 1840s, the railways had taken over almost all postal traffic, and the final mail coaches were taken out of service, to become an object of nostalgic celebration. In 1849, Thomas de Quincey, looking back at the great age of the mail coaches in his essay The English Mail Coach, saw the coach system as representing the conscious presence of a central intellect, that, in the midst of vast distances, of storms, of darkness, of night, overruled all obstacles into one steady cooperation in a national result. To my own feeling, this post office service recalled some mighty orchestra, where 1,000 instruments, all disregarding each other, and so far in danger of discord, yet all obedient as slaves to the supreme baton of some great leader, terminate in a perfection of harmony, like that of heart, veins, and arteries in a healthy animal organization. De Quincey's celebration of the mail coach is partly motivated by nostalgia, both personal and collective, but he is also articulating views of the mail coach system widely held during its heyday. The Royal Mail coach network was seen as a wonder of the age for its complexity, its efficiency, its contribution to the public good, and, not least, its aesthetics and visual spectacle. The countless Royal Mail coaches in their dignified and uniform livery, performing their function with clockwork precision and in choreographed unity. And after its opening in 1829, the new General Post Office at St. Martin's-le-Grand was the heart of that system, and the departure of the mails was its great public spectacle. The start from the General Post Office was, for a long time, one of the sights of London, declared an article on the mail coaches from Country Life in 1899. One 20th century historian of the post office described the scene thus. London was the great radiating centre. In the early 20s, some 17 coaches left the central post office at the same or almost the same time in the evening. The schedules called for departures at 8 p.m. This had been the rule since the days of Palmer. Previous to his reforms, the departure of the mails took place about midnight or later. The departure of the coaches at 8 p.m. was regarded as one of the sights of London, as the gaily painted coaches, drawn by freshly groomed horses, waited in double line for the mails in the spacious yard of St. Martin's. By the time Victoria came to the throne in 1837, the sight must have been imposing indeed, for 28 four-horse mail coaches were departing from St. Martin's every evening. This great scene of drama, bustle, power, and pageantry was widely celebrated in written accounts and, most strikingly, in paintings and prints. Here another print, after a James Pollard painting, shows the north side and rear view of the General Post Office building, with 14 Royal Mail coaches preparing to depart, and each one is identified in the lower margin with its destination town or city, Hastings, Dover, Edinburgh, Manchester, Leeds, and so on. Also present are the mail carts for local deliveries, humble cousins of the grand mail coaches, but they too are liveried and embellished with the royal cipher. Another view shows the main west front of the building on St. Martin's-le-Grand, with the street outside bustling with traffic, people going in and out of the post office or just standing to enjoy the spectacle, and mail coaches emerging from the gate on the left. The nearest vehicle, laden with mail sacks and with its passengers embarked, the guard on the back blowing his horn, is starting off on its way to Leeds. The post office as an institution is celebrated here, held up for our admiration, not just architecturally, but as a central element in society, respectable, dependable, universal. The streets around it, newly widened and elegant, are also respectable, as are the people in dress and behaviour who throng them and who gather to watch the mails depart. Both expansive and detailed, these prints echo the classical order and clarity of form of the new building in their even light, well-defined forms, and careful depiction of the fine details of architecture, vehicles, and the crowds, and their gestures and clothing. These are views in daylight, but of course the work of the post office and the dispatch of the mails happen by day and night, which brings us back to the picture with which we began. This nocturnal scene emphasizes the round-the-clock nature of the post office's operations. The print displays the brightness of the gas lighting of the street and the shop windows. St. Martin's-le-Grand had been lit by gas since 1824, and, as we have heard, the new post office building itself was lit throughout by gas. Throughout the scene, the lanterns of the coaches can be seen glowing, preparing to light their way along the long roads that lead them from the doors of the General Post Office in London to their destinations, far and wide, across the country. Over the whole bustling scene presides the great post office building, serene and authoritative in the moonlight. At the time these pictures were created, this grand building had only stood for a few years. It would stand for a little over 80 years more. As we heard earlier, it was too small almost as soon as it was opened, and numerous extensions and alterations were made during the 19th century to accommodate the post office's ever-expanding needs. Finally, in 1912, the post office demolished the old G.P.O. and replaced it with this elegant piece of Edwardian high-tech business architecture. Of Smirke's grand General Post Office of 1829, no trace remains on St. Martin's-le-Grand. A little of the building does survive, however. The demolition was not uncontroversial, and there was a movement to preserve, if not the whole building, at least part of it. In response, the post office offered the central portico to anyone who would take it, possibly to be re-erected as a feature in a garden or a public park. But nobody did want it, so it all disappeared into the rubble carts, except for a few dismounted capitals from the portico pillars, which were reused as garden ornaments. One of these survives today. It was bought by a builder who eventually donated it to his local council, and it now sits beside Vestry Road in Walthamstow, just outside the local history museum.